ang Pilipino may kakayanan na magpahusay ng kabuhayan Pilipino.
That we call on all patriotic Filipinos to discard ideological differences, party affiliations, disparity of religious beliefs and regional origin, to close our ranks, stand behind one flag, commit our honor, dedicate our lives to fight as best we can in defense of our country.
Ang ating katipunan. Ang ating katipunan. Ang palatuntunang maghahatid sa inyo ng mahahalagang impormasyon tungkol sa mga kaganapan sa loob at labas ng bansa.
Ang ating katipunan.
Magbibigay liwanag sa mga katanungang nagdudulot ng pagkalito sa mga mamamayan hango sa aral ng pandaigdigang kasaysayan.
Ang ating katipunan.
Makikinig sa inyong mga daing at kuro-kuro sa pagsusuri ng mga kasalukuyang suliranin ng ating bayan at ng buong mundo.
Ang ating katipunan.
Maglalatag ng kalutasan ng mga sanhi ng paghihirap ng kalagayan at kabuhayan ng sambayanan.
Ang ating katipunan.
Ihahatid sa inyo ni Itos Valdes ng Philippine LaRouche Society at Partido Politikal ng Katipunan ng Demokratikong Pilipino kasama si Cathy Cruz.
Ang oras sa hudyat, 1 minuto makalipas ang ikapito ng gabi, Philippine Standard Time. Ngayon po ay unang araw ng linggo, no, sa ika-2 ng Hunyo 2024, June 2, 2024. Ang himpilang ito ay kasapi ng KBP, Kapisanan ng mga Broadcaster ng Pilipinas. Magandang gabi mga katipon sa Pilipinas at sa buong mundo. Ito po ang inyong katipon, Cathy Cruz, kasama pa rin ang Pangulo ng Katipunan ng Demokratikong Pilipino, walang iba, kundi si Itos Valdes. Magandang gabi sa iyo, Itos.
Good evening, Cathy, at good evening sa mga tagapanood natin ngayon and tagapakinig sa 558 RMN and our those who are listening on radio and on yung mga Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Rumble. Lahat ng channels po natin, nandun po tayo, simulcast po to. Good evening po.
Thank you, Itos. At ngayon pong gabi nako, please like, share, and subscribe po ang ating pong Katipunan channel, FB page, at syempre ang ating YouTube, gayon din sa Rumble at Twitter o X. At sa lahat po ng ating mga masugid po na taga-subaybay, kung may nais po kayong ibahagi sa amin na impormasyon, umungkahi na nais po ninyong talakayin, magpadala lamang po ng sulat troniko sa partidokdp@gmail.com. At ngayon nga po ay pag-uusapan po natin ang Trump case at sinasabing World War 3. Yan, danger. Yan po ang pamagat ng ating pong pag-uusapan po ngayong gabi. At katulad po ng lagi po nating ginagawa, babalikan po natin ang mga mahahalagang nangyayari nito lamang nagdaang linggo sa iba't ibang bansa tulad po ng Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Estados Unidos at maraming iba pa na nasasangkot ang kapayapaan hindi lamang ng mga nabanggit kong bansa kundi ng buong mundo. Subalit, ano ang mas malalim na dahilan ng paglabas ng 34 verdict counts, 34 counts guilty verdict kay dating Pangulong Donald Trump ng Amerika? Bakit sinasabing kumpas ito ng posibleng ikatlong digmaang pangdaigdig? Magbabalik tanaw po tayo mamaya ng mga ulat katulad po ng Right Side Broadcasting Network, NBC News, Wayon at pahayag din po ni Harley Schlanger, spokesperson ng LaRouche Organization at ni dating Pangulong Trump sa isang press conference na ginawa niya matapos ilabas ang guilty verdict. Kasabay niyan ay ang pagsusuri na ihahatid sa atin ng Pangulo ng Katipunan ng Demokratikong Pilipino na si Itos Valdes. At bago po tuluyan na simulan po natin ang ating pag-uusapan, ilabas po muna natin ang video po. 30 minutes video po ito mula po sa LaRouche Organization nito lamang May 31, 2024, pinamagatang Crossing Red Lines.
Good morning, I'm Carlos Steiger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for May 31st, 2024. Well, there have been quite a flurry of ominous developments in the last days, and I'll just catch you up on them and then get to some of the questions I received from you. Let's start with the fact that Biden yesterday announced the approval of lifting the restrictions of the use of U.S. weapons provided to Ukraine, that they can strike inside Russia. There are a whole series of semi-restrictions, but essentially this was pushed by Zelensky, it was pushed by David Cameron of the United Kingdom, then Blinken, and now it's been endorsed by Biden. This is incredibly destabilizing. It crosses what was once a red line, which was that the U.S. weapons will not be used to strike in Russia. As I said, there are some provisional measures that are attached to it. Those will go out the window just like all the previous red lines. So the reality is it's necessary to acknowledge that Ukraine is lost and move to negotiations, but that's not the policy of this administration. Now, secondly, you have the continuing escalation in Gaza by the Israel Defense Forces. More strikes on civilians in so-called safe zones, which actually is making the case for the International Court of Justice that Israel is in violation of their provisional measures against genocide. And also the International Criminal Court insistence on drafting a warrant for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Again, Israel is crossing a red line. Biden said that there must be no assault into Rafah. Now they're moving to come up with a quantification of what's acceptable and what's not. How many dead Palestinian children are acceptable within the red line? That's the insanity of this situation. Then you also have the fact that the Israelis have sealed 14 kilometers of the border with Egypt, the so-called Philadelphia corridor. And this cuts off more areas where there can be shipments of food crossing into Gaza. And so with the collapse of the pier, the $340 million pier to nowhere that collapsed because of heavy seas, well, there's almost no food and emergency aid going into Gaza right now. So once again, a red line is crossed. The International Court for Justice said you must provide humanitarian aid, access to aid. That's been cut off. And so we see a continuation of a genocidal policy for ethnic cleansing of Palestine by Israel, backed by the Biden administration. Then we have the conviction of Donald Trump on all 34 counts in a New York trial. We'll have more comment on that later. It's clear that this was aimed to weaken Trump. Typical of Biden's strategy, though, it may actually have strengthened him. We'll have some comments on this next week. Then you have an ongoing China-Arab states cooperation forum in Beijing, which includes Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, Tunisia. Mohammed bin Salman from Saudi Arabia is supposed to be there. And what they're discussing is a ceasefire in Gaza, commitment to establish an independent, sovereign Palestinian state, and cooperation for economic development in the region. This could include bringing the Belt and Road Initiative into the region. It also should put on the agenda the Oasis plan of Lyndon LaRouche. But the fact that the Chinese are involved in this, and also there's a China-Brazil proposal for a Ukrainian negotiated settlement, and that would be quite significant as opposed to the phony Swiss peace conference that's being set up on behalf of Zelensky. Finally, let me happily announce that the independent candidacies of Diane Sayre for U.S. Senate and Jose Vega for U.S. Congress in the 15th Congressional District of New York, which is the Bronx, they filed their petitions yesterday, many, many more than required. And so the two of them will be on the ballot. This is significant because they are independent. They're not running as Democrat or Republican. And this gives voters an opportunity to vote for someone who's not part of the corrupt unipolar system. Now, let me get to your questions. The first one came in from, actually from Thailand. Doesn't anyone in the West see the targeting of the Russia early warning sites as dangerous? Well, we do. The Schiller Institute put out a statement, a red alert statement, which will be in the description box below. Circulate it, get it out. It lays out the significance of this. I would say that it's important that we're not alone in raising this. Judge Andrew Napolitano on his blog has had interviews with Douglas McGregor, Jeffrey Sachs, a new one from Gilbert Doctorow, where they've all been clear on the danger of this kind of targeting. In contrast, the Washington Post, one of the few newspapers that ran this as a story, had a very weak story on it. What they said is that the Washington conveyed to Ukraine the attacks on the Russian early warning systems, quote, could be destabilizing. Well, Washington conveying this to Ukraine, it's probable that Washington was involved in the targeting. So the West continues to have a completely idiotic view of this. As I said, there are people speaking up. That's very significant. The one thing that was useful in the Washington Post article is that it identified the death of a salesman, Blinken, and NATO officials, including Stoltenberg, as being responsible for calling on the lift of the restrictions against Ukraine for targeting Russia. But again, it's very weak. What I would suggest is use our statement, the red alert statement, get it around, circulate it, get people moving on this quickly, because this is a life and death situation. If the West starts targeting these early warning systems, that's communicating to Russia that soon you should expect a strike. Now, another question that came in, this from someone in Tampa, Florida. Why no diplomacy? How come there's no discussion going on between Biden and Putin? Well, this has been a characteristic of the Biden administration. The lack of discussion, of negotiation, whether it's Biden personally or other officials, is an absurd rejection of everything we learned from John F. Kennedy and the Cuban Missile Crisis. What stopped the world from going to nuclear war in 1962, when the Soviet Union put missiles into Cuba, nuclear missiles, was the back-channel discussions that were initiated by John F. Kennedy through his brother Robert with the Russian embassy, Soviet embassy in Washington, which then later included a back-channel discussion from Kennedy to Khrushchev directly, and the limited test ban treaty, and a commitment from President Kennedy stated in June 1963 to conduct discussions for a full détente policy with the Soviet Union, in which he said there's no reason to fight. These are issues that can be discussed and resolved peacefully. And this is the lesson of the Cuba Missile Crisis, which apparently no one around Biden understands today. Instead, it's push, provoke, false flag, keep driving to for the intention of weakening Russia, even if it leads to a nuclear war. This is the proof of an insane, collapsing empire. Hopefully, there'll be someone else emerging who can move toward negotiations. I don't see it. I don't see any figures, including Donald Trump at this point, who are talking about that. I may be wrong about the Trump presidency. I'm not wrong about Biden. Biden is not going to be the one who will carry this out. So the danger is that you could end up in a nuclear war with no back channel to prevent it. Now, the next question, I actually anticipated it earlier, about the idiocy of the Gaza pier. It's $320 million for a pier that was supposed to be an alternative to opening up the land routes to provide emergency aid to Gaza. And the person writes a question, why not just demand that Israel open the border crossings for aid to Palestine? Well, why not tell the Israelis to stop killing children? Why not tell the Israelis that there are better ways to deal with the Hamas problem than creating more future Hamas members by mowing the lawn, which is the Israeli euphemism for killing Palestinians? That's what should happen. There should be an end to this fighting, a ceasefire, but then a move toward an independent Palestinian state with a plan for making sure it's economically viable and connected to a mutual benefit policy toward Israel, which would be of strategic importance for peace. And the best example we have is Lyndon LaRouche's Oasis plan. If you don't have something like that, you're going to end up with these stupid ideas of building a pier in the ocean, which cannot withstand the ocean waves. And as a result, the food and emergency aid to the Palestinians will be cut off. And the consequences of that are more deaths, more starvation, and more spread of disease. So it's another example of the idiocy of the present regime in Washington. Now, the final question is, I reported that the campaigns of Diane Serre and Jose Vega filed petitions yesterday to place them on the ballot. For Diane's running for U.S. Senate, Jose is running for U.S. Congress. So someone asks, what can I do to help Diane and Jose's campaign? Obvious, send money. And I'll be posting a link in the description section where you can have access to their website, where you can read what they're talking about, see videos of what they're doing. And if you wish, you can send a contribution. Now, Jose in particular says that he's running to break down the barriers that silence the people. And one of the things they're planning is a June 6th fundraiser featuring Jimmy Dore, the comedian political analyst, who will be there with Jose. And the possibility for this is enormous. We're seeing a whole group of people around Dore and others who are speaking quite seriously about changing the direction of the United States, breaking the policy of the unipolar order, and moving toward a new paradigm of security and economic development. So I'd urge you to go to the websites, do what you can. As I said, also, I'll have the report from the most recent International Peace Coalition meeting that we'll have a report from that. We'll have the red alert statement and then a registration form where you can register for the June 15th, June 16th conference, The World on the Brink. So that's my report for today. Thanks for joining me this week. Share this video as widely as possible and speak to your friends. Don't be afraid of speaking out. This is the moment where individual citizens can make a difference.
Okay, ang inyo pong napanood ay ang summary po na ginawa po ni Harley Schlanger, no? Ang spokesperson po ng LaRouche organization. Itos, alam mo, naalala ko tong inilabas mong mensahe, no? Nitong April 23, 2024, make no mistake, we are on the brink of a global war, the likes of which has no precedent. So, parang ang ano ko, 'di ba, parang point of no return. Yun yung crossing the red lines, Itos.
Yeah. Just to summarize, no, si Harley Schlanger gives an overview kung ano yung mga nangyayari sa mundo at to give a sense of the global nature of this crisis, no. Tayo kasi minsan sa Pilipinas, tayo nakatungtong lang tayo sa anong pinapakain sa atin sa media. So parang yun lang ang tinutuntong natin. So we don't see the global events that will shape the future of our country and our people. It's always been like that. So that's why pinupush namin parate na on occasion, ang dinidiscuss natin dito is local in the context of the global events. Kasi yun talaga yung nagdadala sa atin, nagbibigay direction sa atin kung saan tayo papunta. For example, example lang po, that's why we know that our president does not seem to sense the urgency of this dangerous situation sa mundo. Ngayon, as Harley Schlanger pointed out of the LaRouche organization, sabi niya, we have crossed the red line. Another red line has been crossed. Ang dami ng, when you say a red line has been crossed, wala nang atrasan.
Oo.
Yun lang yun. So no, the point of no return nga, sabi ni Cathy. So, in terms of the Israel-Gaza conflict, magwa-widen po yan. Because Israel seems to be pushing, despite calls by world leaders, yung right-thinking world leaders, na tigil-tigil na yan, usap na tayo, grabe na yung marami nang namamatay dyan. Pag pinipilit nyo pa, bombahin, mas maraming mamamatay. Ito nangyayari sa Ukraine recently, just by today, yung nabalita po namin na nasa Twitter po at wala kayong makukuha again sa mainstream media ng mga ganito. Hindi nila nire-report to na inatake yung pinayagan ni President Biden na gumamit na ang Ukraine ng US-made missiles para umatake sa Russia, sa loob ng Russia na. So hindi lang pandepensa sa gera nila, pero pwede nang umatake at umatake na nga sila. And it's very significant because you go a step closer to nuclear war. And Putin has already warned again. Pag nag-launch yung, and we will show a news clip, I think it's the clip of the one of Putin. I think number 4. Okay, play natin mamaya. Pero yung kay Putin, winarningan na niya yung mga bansa na pag nag-launch kayo ng missile galing sa inyo, hindi galing sa Ukraine, tatamaan ko rin kayo. Maano na warning yun. At saka si Putin po, hindi po malamyak yung taong yan. Hindi indecisive si Putin. Pag sinabi niyang gagawin niya. At existential crisis yung Russia, sabi niya. So pag nag-launch kayo ng missile mula doon, kunwari sa ibang mga bansa na hindi taga-Ukraine, dahil pwede na, sabi ng US, sabi ni President Biden, authorized, magre-retaliate yan. And let's go to a news clip, yung news clip number 3, where please play it, and then we will react to it again, just on this point.
Joining me now on set is NBC News Global Security Reporter Dan DeLewis. Kelly O'Donnell, my colleague, is at the White House for the latest. Kelly, let's get to you quickly. This is a notable shift in policy by the White House, and it comes amid a lot of pressure right now on the administration to get on the same page as what NATO and America's European allies have been saying.
That's right, Peter. And the original intent here was President Biden and his administration wanted to be careful to provide weapons, but to not be so provocative that American weapons could be used inside Russia, perhaps drawing the U.S. into a direct conflict with Russia. That has been one of the principal ideas behind the president's approach since the war in Ukraine began. Now we're at a point 2+ years into the fighting where what we see is that Ukraine has suffered dramatic setbacks over the relentless push from Russia, and some of that is staged inside Russia and then targeting Ukraine. And so making this adjustment, which, as you pointed out, is aligned with some of the thinking of European allies who are also critically important in support for Ukraine, would allow Ukraine to prevent those attacks by striking inside Russia at the bases or operation points where Russian soldiers and forces are working on their own land, but projecting munitions into Ukraine. So that's the sort of scope that we're talking about here. This isn't about going to Moscow or a more aggressive approach, but trying to prevent damage by attacking inside Russia where needed.
And Dan, let me bring you into this conversation a bit. And you and I were talking in the break here, right? This is part of a pattern, and it's one that conservatives, Republicans have criticized the White House on here, which is them sort of slow walking in the eyes of these critics, being reluctant before finally agreeing. Tanks, fighter jets, and beyond. The White House recognizing they needed to do more to help Ukraine sort of take the handcuffs off.
That's right. And it's really, you see friction now between the Ukrainian government and the White House because of this pattern. You often have Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, Bill Burns, the CIA director, staking out the bolder, more aggressive stance in those policy deliberations. The end result is the White House and the president come around, but the Ukrainians will say, look at the time lost, look at the lives lost, and now you have a fairly desperate situation there in the north, and they desperately feel they need to hit Russian forces just over the border.
So specifically it is to try to keep this in a narrow realm. As we heard from Kelly there, the desire is not to start targeting Moscow, go nowhere near Vladimir Putin, so to speak, in the Kremlin here, but really to try to target these forces and other launch points where this offensive is coming from, right?
That's right, because the White House wants to send a message, too, to Moscow. Like, you know, we don't want a direct conflict with Russia. That's right. But so this is a limited area around the border. Having said that, Ukraine on its own, with its drones that they make themselves, have been striking inside Russia repeatedly in these kinds of sabotage actions where they hit oil facilities or they hit an air base. So those will continue, and of course, that's really angered Moscow.
And Kelly, what I'm struck by here is if we put this into political terms quickly, you got what's going on in Gaza with Israel. You got what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. Is that in a lot of ways, as it relates to the president's foreign policy, his future, his fate is dependent on things out of his control, what Vladimir Putin in Russia decides to do. In effect, what Benjamin Netanyahu is deciding to do. There is only so much control this president has had, but here's an opportunity where they're trying to at least try to seize some control and do more.
As so often the case with the president, outside events or other actors can dramatically affect the set of cards that the president must play, and that certainly is true here. We've seen the resistance among lawmakers about supplying Ukraine, as you were talking about delays that might be coming from administration choices. That's been coupled with the delays in getting funding for Ukraine. And it also comes at a time before the G7 summit, which is coming up in Italy in early June. And tomorrow, the Belgian Prime Minister, of course, NATO is housed in Belgium, will be here at the White House. And it begins a kind of renewed sense of these conversations with European partners about the U.S. role in trying to defend and protect Ukraine and help it in its own operations against Russia without going beyond that. And of course, politically, for the president, he separates the decisions he needs to make as commander-in-chief. But the overall politics are certainly being watched by voters here at home who are weary of some of these interventions. And at the same time, you also do see support for a sovereign democratic country like Ukraine among some of the electorate. So it's a hard needle to thread for the president, and he's trying to maintain and show leadership that the U.S. can bring Europeans together and he can be a supportive partner when they sometimes take an early lead on certain things.
Yeah, all smart points there, Kelly. Dan, I want to ask you one other question on a separate topic. This is relating specifically to the defense intelligence community right now, releasing new findings about debris from a missile attack that was discovered inside Ukraine, and the determination was made with, as they describe it, almost certainly that this came from a North Korean missile. This is a big revelation. If it proves to be true, it means that the Russian relationship with North Korea, which we knew to be tight, was even stronger. That North Korea could be providing munitions specifically to Russia right now. How concerned is the U.S. about this? And frankly, how concerned should we be about this pattern and it's the way it's going?
I think it's very concerning, and the intelligence community has been warning now for a while. You have this deepening kind of alliance between Russia, North Korea, and most of all, China.
Yeah.
And this is a case where you have North Korea already helping Russia, giving them a lot of artillery ammunition. And then in this case, they're actually using North Korean ballistic missiles. And they used, the DIA looked at photos, publicly available photos.
Defense Intelligence Agency.
And they just show that, you know, look, these missiles are clearly North Korean. And they came to that conclusion. So it's yet another example of this kind of what the U.S. considers this kind of nefarious network of authoritarian states, all lining up against Ukraine and other democratic countries.
Yeah, also revealing that Vladimir Putin needs the assistance of other countries to have the munitions he needs to continue this war, now 2.5 years old. Dan DeLuce, thank you. Kelly O'Donnell at the White House. Kel, always good to see you.
The other war now. Russia has sent out a harsh warning to the West. President Putin has said that if Ukraine strikes deep into Russia, the West will have to face serious consequences. Listen to it yourself.
The representatives of countries that are NATO members, particularly in Europe, particularly in small countries, should be aware of what they're playing with. They should remember that these are primarily countries with small territory and dense population. And this factor they should take into account before they speak about strikes deep into the Russian territory.
The warning is loud and clear. Putin has threatened a global conflict. Pay attention to the words that he's used. NATO countries with small territory and dense population should think twice before speaking of strikes on Russia. Without taking any names, the Russian president has hit out at France and Germany. This comes in response to what the NATO Secretary General said earlier in the week. Listen to this.
My message is that I think we should now consider those restrictions, because by having too many restrictions, we are tying one hand of the Ukrainian armed forces on their back, because they're reducing their capability to defend themselves, especially in light of the nature of the fighting now taking place in the Kharkiv region, where the Russians can be protected by the national border, which is more or less the same as the front line.
Let me give you some context here. If you've been following the Ukraine war, you would know the restrictions the United States has put on Ukraine's use of its arms. Since the very beginning, American shipments of sophisticated weapons arrived into Ukraine. US President Joe Biden asked Zelensky to never fire them inside Russian territory and to only use them for its counteroffensive. Stoltenberg was referring to these restrictions. By saying that, he's implied that maybe the time has come for Ukraine to start using the Western arms to launch attacks inside Russia. If that wasn't enough to irk Russia, his statement was further supported by the French and German leaders. Listen to what they said.
We think that we should allow them to neutralize military sites from which the missiles are fired. The missiles and basically the military sites from which Ukraine is attacked. But we must not allow them to hit other targets in Russia, obviously civilian capabilities or other military targets.
Ukraine has every possibility under international law for what it is doing. That has to be said explicitly. It was attacked and may defend itself. I find it strange when some people argue that it should not be allowed to defend itself and take measures that are suitable for this.
Now, these statements have angered Putin. In response, he has said that it does not matter if Ukraine is pulling the trigger. The responsibility lies with those who are supplying these arms. And not only arms, but also troops. Putin claims that Western military instructors are already in Ukraine operating undercover as mercenaries. But any move by any country to send soldiers officially would be seen as an escalation and a step towards a serious conflict in Europe, leading to a global conflict. Those were the words he used. The Biden administration feared just this. That's why it imposed restrictions on Ukraine in the very first place. And it still maintains its stance. Listen to this.
We're aware of the interest that President Zelensky has expressed in this regard. I would tell you that there's no change to our policy at this point. We don't encourage or enable the use of U.S.-supplied weapons to strike inside Russia. I would note that the Ukrainians have, in the past, defeated imminent air attacks, such as some of the ones that have occurred in the last few days on their own since the war began.
Well, the Kremlin did not hesitate there. Putin's press secretary Dmitry Peskov mocked the divide in the West. He told Russian media that there is no consensus among the allies on this issue. The United States stays firm on its red line. However, other NATO members, as well as NATO chief, are encouraging Ukraine to attack Russian mainland. Kyiv has done that in the past. It has sent drones to Moscow, attacked oil refineries. It has been using long-range American missiles. So what are the restrictions really about?
Okay, so nakita nyo and narinig nyo sa radyo, these two news items nangyayari ngayon sa US. Ngayon lang yun. Na nag-authorize si Biden na pwede nang umatake sa Russia. Dati po kasi, daw, sinasabi ng US, bibigyan ka namin ng armas, pero hindi nyo pwedeng atakihin yung Russia sa loob. Dahil pag ginawa nyo yan, hindi na namin masiguro kung gaano kalaki ang magiging gera. Ngayon, talong-talo na po yung Ukraine. Hindi na sila makapalag. At so sabi nila Biden, pumayag na sila. At nag-warning na po si Putin. Sabi niya, kung ginawa nyo yan, pag nagpadala kayo ng missile na galing niya Ukraine, nagawa sa Amerika, at tinutulungan ng mga NATO countries yung Ukraine, kahit hindi pa full-fledged member si Ukraine ng NATO, gera na to. It will be Russia. And just like we said, it's going to spread. Hindi dahil kay Putin, lalawak itong gera dahil gusto ng administrasyong Biden na lumawak ito. So they are creating situations where pinipwersa nila si Putin o ginagancho nila at pinoprovoke nila si Putin para gumante. At delikadong-delikado to. So this is where we are now. This is the moment where the world is really sitting on the brink of World War III. Nag-escalate na. And later on, we will discuss how it's connected to Donald Trump and what can we expect locally. And this is also connected to everything happening dito sa may China Sea. At yung mga escalation na ginagawa ng US na gamit ang mga Pilipinong nagpapagamit naman. At kasama diyan yung presidente natin, si BBM. Na nasa Singapore ata ngayon or today. But we will discuss this in more detail later on. But nakita niyo po sa discussion is that hindi na po nagpapanggap na kunwari tinutulungan lang ang Ukraine. Ang lumalabas, lumitaw na sila na, sige, wala na, gumamit ka na, atakihin mo na si Putin, kami bahala sa'yo. Ibig sabihin, another line is going to be crossed. And when you cross that line, pag si Putin gumante, hindi mo na mapigil yan. Kasi kasama na yung ibang mga nations in Europe, Germany, France, other nations, Finland. Lalawak at lalawak to. Napakadelikado po ang lagay ng mundo ngayon. And when you do that again, konti na lang Middle East na yan. Kasi kabila na ng China, Middle East na yan. Madadama yung India. May mga nakikita ako sa Twitter na gumagalaw na yung mga, nagmo-mobilize na yung mga bansa sa Turkey, sa ibang mga areas, putting it in their borders, pati yung sea borders nila, kasi importante ma-secure nila yon. So this is what they're doing. They're mobilizing for war. Mga katipon, they are doing that. Intindihin po natin yan. At whenever there is a conflict like that, pag nadama yung Russia, pag pumasok yung Russia dyan sa gera, hindi malayo na ang China papasok rin. Okay, at pag pumasok yung China, baka sumabog itong area ng Taiwan. Yun po ang mangyayari. At before you know it, dahil yung tension nagsisimmer lang below the surface, isang insidente lang, sabog na. Remember, may humirit, I think it's BBM. Sinabi ni BBM na pag may na-injure o may nasawi na civilian or mag-i-invoke kami ng Visiting Forces Agreement, the EDCA, Mutual Defense. Again, he is very misinformed because hindi naman yung Kongreso ng US kailangan muna magdeklara. Ang ginagawa po ni Presidente Biden ay illegal na po, na nanggegera siya without the consent of Congress. Yun ang nangyayari yun. Sa malaking krisis dyan sa Amerika ngayon na nangyayari, ang gulo. Ang gulo po yung number 1 republic ng mundo. Nagkakagulo po sila. Walang bansa ngayon na hindi nagprepare o naghahanda sa isang malawakang digmaan. So tanga-tanga lang tayo kung hindi natin iniisip yon at hindi natin nakikita yung mga galaw, yung intensyon ng mga gusto manggera, yung mga war hawks at yung mga gustong palawakin yung gera. At hindi tayo nakikinig at hindi tayo naghuminahon na taga muna, mag-usap muna tayo. Malabo yung gera, lahat tayo. Walang mananalo pag may gera, lalo na ngayon yung gera ay nuklear. At later on in the program, we will listen to a nuclear weapons expert, the most renowned. And sasabihin niya, may isa pang balita na inatake na nga ang mga strategic radar systems ng Russia.
Yes.
Ito ay galing sa Ukraine. So, ito yung developing. Ito yung nangyayari. And hindi mo makikita to sa mga mainstream media natin kasi ilalabas lang nila yung approved na pwedeng ilabas. Pero yung mga storyang ganito, wala na pong journalism dyan. Wala na pong nag-aano dyan. Yung mga storyang ito, makuha mo sa Twitter, real time. At ilalabas nila yon. Hindi to parang propaganda at edited. Nakikita mo, ito yung balita, ito yung nangyayari ngayon. At nasagap natin, while nasa show tayo, na sinabi na nga, may inatake na using drone strikes and for sure, galing sa mga Amerikano yun. So this is what's happening now. Cathy, any reaction before we play the video?
Naalala ko lang kanina dun sa sinabi nga rin ni ni Harley Schlanger, no. Etong ano ba tong tinatakan pa mismo yung parang may yung linya na binabanggit kanina ni Harry, na kumbaga yung border hindi na makakapagpasok ng pagkain doon sa sa Ukraine. Tama ba ako ng o sa Palestine? Sa Gaza, sa Gaza.
Sa Gaza.
Oo.
Sa Gaza, no. Gumawa kasi ito yung nakita ko sa Twitter. Gumawa sila ng isang pier, nag-construct sila ng isang pier. Itong US. Hindi ko lang alam kung yun ang sinutukoy mo about
yes,
that. Gumawa silang isang pier na $300 million. Construct sila doon sa may para makapasok ng quote-unquote aid para sa Gaza. God, ibibigay sila sa mga tao. Inulanan. Nasira yung buong pier. So wala nang darating na aid para sa mga Gaza. So parang nag-aksela sila ng 300 million. Um, hindi ko alam yung tukoy ni Harley kasi hindi ko narinig yung buong video, yung audio ko hindi nag-ano. So but when he says you cross the red line, what he means, it's a figurative red line na hindi nakatatak sa lupa yan, nakaano lang yan. It's a metaphoric red line na parang no turning back na to. Hindi mo na masasalba yung sitwasyon, hindi na tayo mag-uusap sa peace. Recently, in contrast, itong China, si Xi Jinping, tsaka yung mga leaders ng Arab nations, nagpo-push sila para sa kapayapaan. Sabi nila, dapat mag-usap, tama na yung walang mananalo dyan sa gera. Upo tayo, mag-usap tayo, at development na pag-usapan natin. Sabi nila, they advocate what they call a two-state solution. So dapat may Palestinian state na ayaw ng Israel. At sinasabi ng China, dapat huminahon tayo. Sabi ni Xi, huminahon tayo, huwag tayo mag-ano sa gera. Hindi maganda para kahit kanino yung gera. Sabi niya in so many words. So this is the president of China already saying that. And saying and advocating through in a conference in the Middle East just today or recently. Nasabi niya, tama na yan. It should not continue anymore. Yung ganyan na gera, hindi na kailangan. Walang mananalo dyan. Ilan.
Pero alam mo, Itos, dun sa mga reports kanina, it boils down na parang ang Estados Unidos sangkot sa lahat ng ito. 'Di ba? Ang liwaliwanag. Tapos, at yun ang tingin ko lang, Itos, correct me if I'm wrong, parang yun yung nag-ugat o dahilan kung bakit talagang winawasak nila si dating Pangulong Donald Trump. Dahil ang punteriya ni Biden talaga ay makipaggera talaga. Kasi obvious yung lahat ng mga reports kanina, Itos.
Right. And hindi pa natin binabanatan si Biden, no? Pwede natin banatan si Biden sa show na to, no? Kasi obvious na eh. Obvious na hindi siya in control of anything. Hindi siya makapag-desisyon, para siyang puppet nga. Lumalakad lang siya, ito yung sinasabi niya. Hindi natin nakikita niyan sa mainstream media kasi ayaw nilang ipalabas sa mundo. So kontrolado ang pinapalabas dito sa news dito. So kaya kailangan hanapin nyo dyan sa may YouTube or dyan sa may Twitter. Hanapin nyo, makikita nyo yung totoong estado ni Biden. So ang consensus, pati na sa US, pati na sa mainstream media sa US, sinasabi nila, hindi si Biden ang nagdidesisyon. Iba. Ang question ngayon, sino nagdidesisyon sa mga ganyan?
Exactly.
Sino ba yung may intention na manggera? Sino ba yung nagsabi dati na gusto na threat sa democracy, quote-unquote, si Putin tsaka si Xi Jinping? Sino ba ang nagsabi may Asian pivot tayo na maglalagay tayo ng mga 60% of our naval armed forces, lalagay natin sa South China Sea at West Philippine Sea? Sino bang presidente ang nagsabi no? Di ba si Obama?
Yes.
Okay. So Obama and Hillary. Remember yung plataforma ni Hillary? Sabi niya, dinidemonize niya si Putin tsaka si Xi Jinping. Sinasabi niya, at lahat may consensus na pag nanalo si Hillary in 2016, magkakagera tayo. Iba yung landas ng mundo na puntahan. Na sa atin, napunta si former President Duterte. Remember, before Duterte, si Pinoy, di ba?
Yes.
And Pinoy was following the US against China, di ba? Right. And now, Si Marcos is doing the same thing Pinoy did.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Even more so. So yung break lang doon is Duterte and Trump.
Mhm.
Right? Na hindi tayo pinasok sa gera. Kasi kung nanalo si Hillary, gera yan. China and Russia. Kasi yun yung gusto nilang mangyari. Remember, ang magkasunod na presidente niyan, George Bush 1, yung tatay ni George Bush 1, tapos si senior, tapos si Clinton, 'di ba? Tapos si Bush Jr., 'di ba? Tapos nun si Obama. Okay? 8 years yun. So remember, kailan nangyayari yung mga gera during those presidents. And then pumasok si Trump. Tapos tumigil lahat ng gera.
Nag-iba.
Right? Tapos nakipag-negotiation siya sa ibang mga bansa. Tapos pumunta pa siya sa North Korea. And sabi ni Trump, palalahanan natin to, sabi ni Trump sa kampanya niya, na hindi regime change ang gagawin niya. Hindi kami interesado dyan. Tsaka ang the future belongs to patriots, not globalists. Okay? And the same thing with Duterte. Hindi nagalit si Trump kay Duterte nung nakipagkaibigan siya kay Xi Jinping. Di ba? Pinabayaan lang niya. Gusto niyo di ba? Gusto niyo that's your independent foreign policy. Dapat choice niyo yan kung anong gusto niyo gawin. Walang threatening. Ngayon, pasok si Biden. Ito naman si Junior, Marcos, sunod na sunod kung anong gusto ni Biden. Alalahanin po natin si Biden at yung mga tao sa likod niya, hindi yun yung American people. Hindi yun yung mga Amerikano. Yan ang tinatawag natin the Biden administration and the State Department. And some will call it the deep state. Yun ang nagdidesisyon. Si Biden po, pag nakita niyo sa Twitter, di man lang makalakad ng mahusay, na siya, parang senile na siya. So walang naniniwala sa kanya kung ano. Yung mga speeches niya, hindi niya ma-pronounce yung mga salita ng mahusay. But before we move on to the Trump issue, I wanted to show an excerpt from a Schiller Institute event online na na-interview nila isang dalubhasa nuclear weapons expert na sinasabi niya anong detalye, anong ginawa ng mga drone strikes sa Russia ngayon at anong intention nun. Now this guy, I think yung background niya, teka, kunin ko kay he is a nuclear weapons expert from MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So Dr. Theodore Postol, Professor Emeritus of Science, Technology, and National Security at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He's a retired colonel. Okay, so let's listen to his warning and listen to the technical aspect of it. We will try to explain it in layman's terms as best we can after his excerpt. There, please.
I'm very honored to bring on Dr. Professor Theodore Postol, who is a professor emeritus of science, technology, and national security at MIT. And I would say probably the leading nuclear weapons expert, possibly in the world, but very high-ranking nuclear weapons expert. And I'd like to invite you, Ted Postol, to speak. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. I'll try to be, of course, brief. I understand there's a lot of other people discussing things, but at the same time, I'd like to provide you with some very basic information that will help you visualize the situation with regard to the early warning problem. As Helga pointed out, the early warning radars at Armavir and Orsk were attacked by drones, Ukrainian drones. And it does not appear that the Orsk radar suffered significant damage, at least as far as we can tell. But the Armavir radars, and there are two of them there, did suffer significant damage. And hopefully the damage can be repaired quickly. And so those radars can be brought back into operation. Now, if the United States had lost an early warning radar that performs the function that the radars at Armavir perform, we, the United States, would be able to look down from space with satellites we have, and we could see if there were missiles being launched from anywhere in the world that would be taking advantage of the radar being lost at that moment. Unfortunately, the Russians do not have such a capability. There's a long and detailed story about how I discovered this. It's been reconfirmed many times, and unfortunately, it has not yet changed, although there is some indication that possibly it will be changing in the next few years. There will be finally some satellites launched that may be able to do the job. We don't know enough about them yet, but we do know that they are supposed to go into what are called geosynchronous orbits. And if they are designed to look down, which we are not yet sure of, then the Russians will have this capability and the whole world will be much safer. I want to underscore that the lack of a Russian capability in this area jeopardizes the security of the whole world. The radars at Armavir there are two radars that, can I get the first slide, please? There you go, thank you. The two radars at Armavir the slide I'm showing you shows the radar fans of three radars. There are two radar fans on the left side of your screen that are overlapping slightly at the middle. And those are the radars at Armavir. Each look into an azimuth of about 120 degrees. So between the two radars, you can cover an azimuth of about 240 degrees. To the right is the radar fan at Orsk, and that's also a 120 degree fan. And as you can see, there's what I call a ground shadow underlying the radar fans, and that simply shows you where on the Earth's surface, if a rocket is launched against, for example, Moscow, it would break the radar fan. Keep in mind that the radar fans in some locations are hundreds of kilometers above the location on the Earth that I call the ground shadow. So it will take them time to climb to an altitude where they break into the surveillance fan of those radars. Now, if you had satellites in space, let's concentrate for the moment on the Indian Ocean. Those satellites could tell essentially immediately, if they were looking down, they could tell essentially immediately that something was launched at Moscow if the Russians had this satellite. They don't have this capability. So the best they can do is start seeing objects once they rise into the radar fan of the radars. These radar fans are limited. In this case, the distance shown in the radar fans is just simply to make the graphics easier to understand. They're actually longer range than the fans that are shown here. If we look at the next slide, we can get a sense of why of the timelines that that the radars give. So, for example, if you look at the radar fan that is colored yellow, and then you look at the trajectories these are real trajectories. They're calculated according to the laws of physics. You could see that the points are at 1 minute intervals. So if you look at the far left side, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 6 minutes after launch, you would begin to travel through the radar fan that is forward of Moscow. This particular radar fan is placed about 1,000 kilometers forward of Moscow. It's not exact relative to the fans at Armavir and Orsk, but it generally is good enough for illustrating the issues. So if you had the satellites in space, you could see the launch of the missile essentially at the left origin of the graph, because you would immediately tell from looking down in space that you could see the bright exhaust plume of the rocket, and you would know for 5 or 6 minutes before the radar fan picked up the incoming missiles that you were under attack. And that's important. 5 or 6 minutes is a very short time. Now, in the case of losing these radar fans, I've shown a second radar fan that's colored red. And that is a fan, those are fans that come from radars that are actually in Moscow, very big, long-range radars that are in Moscow itself. So you can see that 3 or 4 minutes after the radar fan, the forward radar fans, let's say at Armavir, would see an incoming set of rockets attacking, you would then see them on from the radars in Moscow. Of course, if the yellow radar fan is not there because the radar is not operating, then the decision-making time, or the warning time, is compressed by 2 or 3 minutes. Keep in mind that when an object enters this radar fan that I've depicted on this screen, it takes some time, perhaps a second or two, for the radar to collect enough energy to detect the incoming target, the rocket that's coming in. And then it takes another few seconds for it to track the object long enough that it can draw a straight line through the different points and then estimate where the object is going, that it's in fact going to Moscow in this case. So, so time is consumed in every step of the operation. Now, if I show you the third slide,
I think there is.
I've just put together a notional time for the amount of time left for decision making that is required by decision makers. So, for example, in the top row, I say time for attacking missiles to rise over the horizon into the line of sight of the early warning radar. It might take a minute. It might take you that long. Another minute to just characterize that the targets are missiles coming in, know what they are. So 2 minutes are consumed there. A military and civil command conference, let's ignore that for the moment, because that's an American process. It may not, the Russians will have their own system. Time for command and unit elements of the silo-based forces to react to a launch order, 2 to 4 minutes. That again is a number for an American system. Time for missile crews to go through a full launch procedure, 1 to 3 minutes. That's going to be the same for Russians and Americans. And then we have time for the missiles to launch from their silos. They have to get far enough away from their silos because, and it takes a minute or two, because if warheads are detonating on the ICBM silo fields, the blast waves from those warheads even though they're relatively low pressure, if the missiles in the sky, the ICBMs will be destroyed. So they have to be flying out. They have to get out of the air atmosphere above the silo fields. So these are the timelines that the Russians will certainly have in mind. So if you have 5 minutes consumed, and it's much more likely to be 7 or 8 minutes, the timelines can be easily no more than 7 or 8 minutes if they're using only the radars in Moscow. So this means that the Russian political leadership might have less than a few minutes to make a decision on whether or not to launch their forces. Now, we don't know what the Russians, there are lots of people who claim to know, but I don't know. And I know that other people don't know what they claim to know. We really don't know what the Russians have chosen to do to deal with this situation. It's very likely that the Russians have made plans to assure that the launch of their missiles occurs by one means or another. This could mean what was called pre-delegated authority. So under certain conditions, and those conditions are determined by human decision makers and circumstances, these launches could be done in an automated fashion. So the loss of 2 or 3 minutes in the warning system is very serious and very critical. So this is not something that should be taken lightly. Now, I don't want to take too much time on this. We're going to have some very knowledgeable military people like Colonel Black speaking and others. So I will not take any more time here, although I am very happy to talk in more detail about the military issues if there's a role for me to play here. But I prefer that the military experts talk, although I can add important technical details if people would like to hear about them. And we'll leave it for the question and answer period and discussion. Thank you.
Okay, at napanood nyo yung ayan. Yung Schiller Institute interview with nuclear weapons expert Dr. Theodore Postol. Medyo maraming technical itos, pero isa ang ang nakakatakot, parang alam mo yon, sa isang iglap tapos ang daigdig.
Yeah. So just a summary, yung sinasabi niya. Nakita niya, sinabi niya na inatake na yung dalawang early detection radar sites in certain locations in Russia. Now, pag may radar po, radar is, you will see if there are missiles coming in and all of that. May limitation yan. You will put that at a certain height sa mountains, para makadetect. Pero pag hindi umakyat yung missile, kunyari pina-launch ng isang missile towards Moscow, may oras yan bago i-detect ng radar. Okay? Hindi kaagad-agad. Hindi parang video game yan. Hindi kaagad-agad i-madidetect ng radar. Pag pumasok lang sa sinasabi nilang a field where the radar is, yung isang slide na sinasabi niyang may fan. Okay? At pag below the radar, kasi tinalagay mo sa taas para pag nakita mo yung isang missile na packet na ganyan. Pag below pa na makikita ng radar, umiikot yung radar na ganyan, hindi madidetect. Ngayon, time is of the essence kasi ilang minuto na lang yan, tatamaan ka na. Okay. Sabi rin niya, ang Russia daw, ang alam niya sa dami-dami niyang decades sa field, no? Ang alam daw niya, yung US kasi may ganitong klaseng early warning detection plus may satellite. Ang satellite kasi madidetect niya kung ang launch right away. Pero sabi niya, hindi niya alam daw kung yung Russia may gano'n. Ang pagkakalam niya, wala silang gano'n. Okay. At we should listen to what he says. Kung may satellite yung Russia na nakaka-detect ng ganyan, there will be less danger of war. Sabi niya, but since hindi siya sigurado na may ganon, mas malaki yung danger ng gera. Bakit? Because since Russia, pag na-detect ng early warning system nila, alam nila ilang minuto na lang tatama na yung missile sa kanila. At may mga protocol yan. Yung last slide na pinakita niya, yung ibang-ibang minuto. Yung protocol daw ng US at Russia, more or less the same. I-detect ng radar. I-detect yung ilang minuto yon. Pag na-detect, from launch to impact, i-detect ng radar. Tapos i-analyze pa ng radar kung saan location, kung saan galing and all. Pagkatapos yan, i-alerto yung military chain of command. Pag yung military chain of command, may mga protocol yan. May step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. That will take ilang minutes pa. Tapos after that, itataas nila sa decision makers. Like, I'm assuming the generals. Pag general, kay Putin na rin. Tapos magde-decide pa sila. So another 4 minutes daw yon. Ang bilis ng decision-making process, I guess sa US, ganun rin. So, sabi niya, it takes 7 to 13 minutes daw yung buo. Kailangan mag-decide sila kung mag-retaliate sila o hindi. Kung totoo man lang yung threat. Kasi i-check mo baka naman na-hack yung sistema nila, hindi naman totoo, tapos magpakawala sila ng kanilang nuclear missiles, tapos mali pala. So there's a lot of back-checking and ano. So sabi niya, pag may satellite rin yung Russia, ma-check early on kung totoo nga na mag-launch. Pero ngayon, hindi siya sigurado kung meron. So delikado na tayo dyan. Tapos, inatake pa ng Ukraine yung early detection radar. So when that happens, mas delikado kasi mas red alert yung mga Russian ngayon. Kasi alam nila na weak na sila, hindi ma-detect na maaga, ayaw nila maunahan. Ngayon, I'm sure, meron silang mga technology that can detect. Pero sabi nga nitong si Doctor, sabi niya, hindi siya sigurado. Ang alam niya, hindi nila nagawa. Siguro nakapag-launch sila ng mga satellites in the recent years, no? Pero hindi po siya sigurado. So, mas delikado pag wala silang ganon. Parang sinasabi ni LaRouche dati, dapat yung missile defense na technology, dapat available sa Russia and available sa US. Why? Para alam nila na walang unahan. Pag walang unahan, hindi sila, parang mas less yung danger ng gera.
Oo nga naman.
Pero pag lugi yung isang country, mas malaki yung danger.
Mas malaki yung chance.
Diba? So it makes sense that way, diba, Kat?
Yes.
Yan ang military tactics and that's the highest level itong si Dr. Postel yan. But I wanted to show that because ang sinabi nga niya, inatake na nga. So ang intention ng atake na yon is to disable the Russian early warning system, which is delikado at alam ng Russia yan. Kasi pag alam ng Russia na pilay tayo dyan sa area na yan at alam niya, alam ng kalaban niya, delikado na yan. Kasi hindi na siya magpo-protocol, hindi na maghihintay, hindi na mag-check, hindi na pipindot na lang siya kasi alam niya, paunahan siya. Mas delikado. At yan ang intensyon. At kaya, sinasabi ko, sobra tayong delikado ngayon. Sa isang pag ang isang nuclear, kasi may mga general dyan sa US o yung mga think tanks na sinasabi, gumagawa sila ng mga studies, mag-analyze sila. Kaya ba nating mag-survive ng isang nuclear war? At may mga henyo na nag-a-analyze dyan at inaabiso yung mga generals dyan sa US na kaya natin. Pag inunahan natin ganyan, babalik sa atin yung Russia, pero kaya natin. May maraming mamamatay, pero tayo ang magwawagi sa huli. Ganon ang pag-iisip nila, ganon ang pag-uusap nila. Which is very, very scary and very dangerous at this point. Okay? So, ganun ang ginagawa nila ngayon. Parang tinetesti nila yung mga Russians. Pero sabi nga ni Putin, pag nabalitaan niya na may ganyan, na may nag-launch kayo ng ganyan, hindi siya pipigil. So, nandito na nga tayo. Right? So, and then China is another scenario altogether. Because if they start to move, if there is a conflict in Taiwan, that area, the US will get us involved with this whole thing. And just to yung mga technology ng nuclear ngayon, yung gera po ngayon, hindi magi-invade, hindi magpapadala ng sa katutak ng barko para pumunta sa mga natin, sa shores natin at magpapadala ng sundalo. Kung gusto nilang patayin ng Pilipinas, kung gusto nilang girahin ng Pilipinas, hindi na sila gagalaw from China. Yung mga missiles nila, yung Dongfeng hypersonic, can reach the US. So they don't need, if kung gusto talaga manggera ng China, hindi sila kailangang gumalaw. Pagpapalipad na lang siya ng mga missiles papunta dito. At yan, may nuclear. That is the warfare now. Ang US can target Russia and vice versa with hypersonic missiles. Hindi na sila kailangang gumalaw. At yung mga sundalo-sundalo nila, hindi na kailangang magpadala. Magpipindot lang sila ng isang at magla-launch na yan. Pati na yung mga submarine ng US. Alam po ng China yan. Nandito na yung mga nuclear subs ng US dito sa South China Sea and West Philippine Sea, whatever you want to call it, in and around this area. Since 2009. Kasi yan ang inutos ni Obama. So the build-up of the war has been there for a decade already. The build-up, kaya nagbe-build yung mga China ng mga bases dyan on top. Kaya nagkakagulo. Kasi alam nila, nandyan na yung US, nandyan na sa ilalim, nasa submarine. And an Ohio-class sub was what? 20 plus warheads per submarine? And one nuclear warhead can kill what? 2 million people? Maybe more. And sigurado po tayo, kahit hindi nila sinasabi, yung mga EDCA bases, pinasukan na yan ng mga missile ng US. At alam ng China yan. Kasi ang China, maraming satellites. So they will also see. US has satellites, China has satellites. I think India has satellites and they might be sharing information. Tapos si Russia, sabi nga ni Dr. Posel, hindi siya sigurado kung meron silang ganyan. Pero ako feeling ko meron naman silang ganyan. At this point. They might have bought from China or sharing data. So this is where we are now. And this is the danger of the war that we face. Right, just by today, pagdating ng June, nag-escalate na. Nag-ano na naman sila. They're pushing forward into a new phase na naman na mas delikado. At hindi magbe-benefit yung Pilipinas na napakamahal na sinasabi po natin. Pag nagkagera kahit saan man sa mundo, pag nasarado yung Egypt, yung canal, Suez Canal, to traffic, international traffic, yung oil, where will it come from? And trade. Tapos pag dito nagkagera dito sa South China Sea, magsasara yung Straits of Singapore, Malacca Straits. Kasi may mga warships doon. Eh, yung Pilipinas, lahat ng pamumuhay nila imported. Diba? Pagkain, oil, energy, lahat imported. Diba? So we do not benefit from anything like this. We benefit from cooperation and economic cooperation and development. We will benefit from that. We will lose in a war. We have no, maski na mag-away, kung nag-open war na dyan sa China versus the US, talo tayo. Walang makakarating sa atin na pagkain. Wala. Tapos, yung mga EDCA bases na tina-target, pasabugin pa ng China yun. Diba? So this is where we are. Kat, you wanna comment before we go to the Trump?
Magandang dumiretso na tayo dun sa Trump case kasi it's already 8:20 na po ng gabi, Philippine Standard Time, at baka magipit tayo sa oras. Magandang marinig din ng ating mga kababayan.
So, I wanted to discuss this because this all happened right after the verdict.
Verdict, yes.
Na sinasabi lang convicted si Trump ng 34 counts. Pero pag sinuri mo, tinanong mo sa mga kaibigan nyo, tinatanong nyo sa mga nagpo-post dyan, na happy sila, na guilty si Trump, tanong nyo, guilty of what? Hindi nila alam.
Hindi nila alam.
At just to be technical about it, the jury that voted him on 34 counts, first of all, their decision is unprecedented. Never in the whole history of the United States na nagka-decision na ganyan. With anybody. Okay? Why? Because the judge instructed the jury how to vote. So it is a sham trial nga, yung sabi natin. It is rigged. Sabi nga ni Trump, it is rigged. He instructed how to vote. Binigyan sila ng notes. At ang sinabi niya, hindi kailangan unanimous. Kasi ang jury system po sa US, pag isang juror lang, what is jury? Jury of your peers. You will be judged by a jury of your peers. The jury system is, kukuha sila ng tao from different walks of life and different areas in the neighborhood, in the area. And they will be brought together and you have to look at the case and you decide. And you will give the judge what you find, yung verdict mo. But, kailangan, pag may isa dyan, I think, ilan sila? 12? Pag may isa lang dyan na nagsabi na hindi siya guilty, wala na. Kailangan unanimous parate. Okay? So, hindi siya guilty, mistrial yan, hung jury, at wala. Okay? Ang ginawa ng judge, sabi niya, kahit hindi lahat-lahat kayo, all 12 will be unanimous. Pwede mga 4 kayo, sinasabi nyo, ito, palagay ko guilty. Tapos yung ibang 4, itong count guilty siya. Ko-consider ko yun unanimous. Na illegal yun. That's not done. That's never been done in the history of the United States. First time ginawa nila. And the other thing is that they did it to Trump, who was supposed to have presidential immunity. You cannot sue a former president. And the charges against him are so flimsy and so walang ano, yung nag-aakusa sa kanya, inamin na niya sa korte na walang nangyari. Yung lawyer niya na corrupt, na sinasabi niya kumuha siya ng pera at binigay doon sa accuser ni Trump, admitted in court na nagsisinungaling siya kay Trump. And sinungaling talaga siya, marami siyang ibang kaso. Pero still, guilty pa rin si Trump. Yun ang pinapalabas nila. Siyempre, gagawin ng mainstream media at ng kalaban ni Trump na ano sila, na napaka masamang tao ni Trump at masaya sila na guilty. Wala silang pakialam kung malaki man lang kaso o maliit. Ang gusto lang nila guilty. Pero what does this do? Actually, it sets a precedent. A precedent means so now you can charge former presidents for what they did. It opens it up. Kasi ginawa nila kay Trump eh. Pero ngayon, pwede nang kasuhan si Bush, si Obama, si Bill Clinton. Lahat sila. At mas malala yung mga krimen nila. Yan ang nangyayari. Okay, with regards to yung voting, yung US. Nagalit ba yung mga tao? Bumaba ba yung polls ni Trump? Hindi, tumaas pa. Lalo nang tumaas. Kasi alam ng mga American people, alam ng mga Amerikano na hindi makatarungan yung ginawa nila kay Trump. At alam nilang sarswela lang yung trial na yan. Tumaas yung rating ni Trump. At yung fundraising niya in 24 hours, people donated 50 million to President Trump. And chine-cheer siya. Kanina, nakita ko sa video sa X, pumunta siya sa UFC, yung Ultimate Fighting Championship, yung laro doon. Yung buong arena, parang pinalakpakan siya. At sumisigaw sila, we want Trump, we want Trump. So hindi naka-apekto, naka-ano pa siya. Lumamang pa siya. So baliktad na nangyari. So I don't know if I think we can play like 5 minutes of President Trump's address.
Yes.
After the conviction kasi nagsalita siya. So pakita lang natin sa mga tao kasi hindi nila nakikita sa mainstream media to, hindi nila pinapakita at all. So pakita lang natin for a while. And then maybe 5-6 minutes, I'll tell you when to cut it.
This is a case where if they can do this to me, they can do this to anyone. And these are bad people. These are, in many cases, I believe, sick people. When you look at our country, what's happening where millions and millions of people are flowing in from all parts of the world, not just South America, from Africa, from Asia, from the Middle East. And they're coming in from jails and prisons, and they're coming in from mental institutions and insane asylums. They're coming in from all over the world into our country. And we have a president and a group of fascists that don't want to do anything about it because they could right now, today, he could stop it. But he's not. They're destroying our country. Our country is in very bad shape. And they're very much against me saying these things. They want to raise your taxes by 4 times. They want to stop you from having cars with their ridiculous mandates that make it impossible for you to get a car or afford a car. But make it very possible for China to build all of our cars. It's a very serious problem that we have. We just went through one of many experiences where we had a conflicted judge, highly conflicted. There's never been a more conflicted judge. Now, I'm under a gag order, which nobody's ever been under. No presidential candidate's ever been under a gag order before. I'm under a gag order, nasty gag order, where I've had to pay thousands of dollars in penalties and fines and was threatened with jail. Think of it. I'm the leading candidate. I'm leading Biden by a lot, and I'm leading the Republicans to the point where that's over. So I'm the leading person for president, and I'm under a gag order by a man that can't put two sentences together, given by a court, and they are in total conjunction with the White House and the DOJ, just so you understand. This is all done by Biden and his people. Maybe his people more importantly. I don't know if Biden knows too much about it, because I don't know if he knows about anything. But he's nevertheless the president, so we have to use his name. And this is done by Washington, and nobody's ever seen anything like it. So we have a judge who's highly conflicted. You know what the confliction is. Nobody wants to write about it, and I'm not allowed to talk about it. If I do, he said, I get put in jail. So we'll play that game a little bit longer. We won't talk about it, but you're allowed to talk about it. I hope you do, because there's never been anybody so conflicted as this. As far as the trial itself, it was very unfair. We weren't allowed to use our election expert under any circumstances. You saw what happened to some of the witnesses that were on our side. They were literally crucified by this man who looks like an angel, but he's really a devil. He looks so nice and soft. People say, oh, he seems like such a nice man. No, unless you saw him in action. And you saw that with a certain witness that went through hell. And when we wanted to do things, he wouldn't let him. It was a rigged trial. We wanted a venue change where we could have a fair trial. We didn't get it. We wanted a judge change. We wanted a judge that wasn't conflicted. And obviously he didn't do that. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We had a DA who was a failed DA. Crime is rampant in New York, violent crime. That's what he's really supposed to be looking at. Crime is rampant in New York. Yesterday in McDonald's, you had a man hitting him up with machetes, a machete. Whoever can imagine even a machete being wielded in a store, in a place where they're eating, and he's going rampant. And Bragg is down watching a trial on what they call crimes. They're falsifying business records. That sounds so bad. To me, it sounds very bad. You know, it's only a misdemeanor, but to me, it sounds so bad. When they say falsifying business, that's a bad thing for me. I've never had that before. I'm falsifying. You know what falsifying business records is? In the first degree. They say falsifying business records. Sounds so good, right? It means that legal expense, I paid a lawyer, totally legal. I paid a lawyer a legal expense. And a bookkeeper, without any knowledge from me, correctly marked it down in the books. A very professional woman, highly respected, she testified. Marked it down in the books, a legal expense. So a legal expense, paid a lawyer, is a legal expense in the books. It's not sheetrock, construction, or any other thing. It's a legal expense. Think of that. This is what the falsification of business records were. And I said, what else are you going to call it? What else are you going to call it? Now, I would have testified. I wanted to testify. The theory is you never testify, because as soon as you testify, anybody, if it were George Washington, don't testify, because they'll get you on something that you said slightly wrong, and then they sue you for perjury. But I didn't care about that. I wanted to. But the judge allowed them to go into everything that I was ever involved in, not this case, everything that I was ever involved in, which is a first. In other words, you could go into every single thing that I ever did. Was he a bad boy here? Was he a bad boy there? And my lawyer said, what do you need to go through? And all you wanted to do is testify simply on this case. Because I would have loved to have testified. To this day, I would have liked to have testified. But you would have said something out of whack, like it was a beautiful sunny day and it was actually raining out. And I very much appreciate the big crowd of people outside. That's incredible what's happening. The level of support has been incredible. So the whole thing is...
Okay.
Yeah, so that was a press conference of Trump right after in announcing verdict. meron siyang gag order which has never happened before, lalo na sa previous president. So obviously, they are persecuting this guy because ayaw nila siya manalo. He is by far, the leading candidate over Biden, over everybody else this coming election po sa US in November. Number one candidate by far. At yung suporta ng tao ng Amerika sa kanyang grabe. At lumalabas rin na in 2020, lumalabas na yung mga katotohanan tungkol sa 2020 na nandaya talaga yung kapila. At yung mga counties na yon at yung mga states na yon nagsasabi na rin na babaguhin nila yung sistema. Hindi nila na kukunin yung Dominion/Smartmatic. Okay? Papalitan na nila. At yung iba, mag-hand counting ulit na kaya namang gawin. Okay, so this is the effect of that. But when this thing happened, napansin niyo po yung explanation niya. Sabi nila, he falsified legal records. He falsified his records. How? Kasi nilagay niya sa legal expense. Tapos sinasabi nila, yung legal expense na binayaran yung lawyer niya na napaka-corrupt noon, binayaran yung babae. Na kunwari, si Trump ang nagbabayad sa babae para tumahimik. Pero sinasabi nila, hindi dapat nilagay ni Trump legal expense. Accounting error. May nawala ba? Wala. Meron bang ninakaw na pera? Wala. Sino yung naging agrabyado? Wala. But they still convicted him. This is the kind of viciousness na they're going after Trump. Kasi ayaw nilang manalo si Trump. Kasi pag nanalo si Trump, lahat sila preso. Alam nila yon. Kasi sila yung kriminal, hindi po si Trump. And Trump, what he represents, and sinasabi niya ngayon, itong Biden, kasama si Obama, nakasama si Hillary, at kasama si yung iba, sila Bush. Gusto nila magkagera. Ako ayoko manggera. Gusto ko business. Mag-business tayo, economic development. At sabi niya, kung ako yan, kakausapin ko si Putin, kausapin ko si Xi, kausapin ko yung lahat ng ibang mga leader sa mundo, at sasabihin ko, wag na tayo mag-away-away, wag na yung gera-gera. Let's do development for people. At kaya niyang gawin yon. Sila Biden, yung administration, ayaw yun. Gusto nila ng gera. Kaya ayaw nila si Trump. And what the Trump represents, the significance, is a return to sanity for the world. Kasi pag nakita ngayon yung US, yung inflation, yung crime is going up. Tapos maraming mga illegal na aliens, sabi nga nila, illegal na pumapasok sa US galing Mexico. At hindi lang South Americans, buong mundo, Africa, Asia, China, Middle East, pumapasok na sa southern border ng US. Pumapasok sa milyones po yun. At gusto ng mga Democrat na bigyan sila ng pagkakataong bumoto kahit hindi sila official citizens ng US. Kaya iyon yung nangyayari ngayon sa US at significant po yun. Number one, US is our number one trading partner. And if their economy goes down, we will also go down. Nakikita na po natin. So if we're too focused on US, at ayaw natin kausapin yung China at yung mga ibang bansa, kawawa po tayo. We as the Filipinos, kawawa. Makikita na po natin na nararamdaman ng majority of our countrymen yung hirap ng buhay. Yung pagkain, the cost of food, yung cost of electricity, utilities, at mahirap talaga yung buhay. At naawa po kami sa Pilipino. And it doesn't seem like our government is listening. Sunod lang sila ng sunod sa agenda nitong mga gustong magkagera. Yun lang po. So that was our presentation today. That was our show today. Maybe we can read some comments, Cathy, kung meron man, or react ka
Yeah.
muna if you want, di ba? I still
Diba,
have about maybe 20 minutes, di ba? Sige.
Bago natin puntahan yung ating mga texters, no. It's 8:38 na po ng gabi Philippine Standard Time, at kayo po ay patuloy na nakikinig sa impilan pa rin ng RMN DZXL 558 kHz, at sabayan niyo po kaming napapakinggan sa pamagitan po ng Katipunan Channel social media accounts sa ating pong Facebook page at YouTube account. Please like, share, and subscribe ang aming pong mga social media accounts, lalo na po sa X. At syempre, may katanungan lang ang iba nating mga kababayan na nagte-text din. But of course, bago ko basahin yung text na yan, alam mo, ito parang ang dami-daming issue na nangyayari ngayon. Pero dito sa Pilipinas, ang daming issue na kinakaharap ng administrasyon. Obviously, kamakailan lang yung mga mangingisda natin, 'di ba? Grabe yung naging madamdamin yung kanilang mga mensahe at talagang reklamo dahil sa sobrang taas ng bilihin, mataas ang singil ng kuryente at tubig, dagdagan pa ng nagkakaroon ng mga rotational brownouts, no? So, bukod pa dyan, may mga iskandalong kinakaharap yung Pangulo natin, kasama yung mga kabinete niya. Ang tingin ng marami dito, Itos, mukhang mas gugustuhin ng ating Pangulo na magkagulo talaga para, sabi nga, mabura lahat yung mga problema ng administrasyon. Ano ang pagtingin mo dito, Itos?
Well, that doesn't do anybody good na kung ganun nga ang pag-iisip niya, no? Yung sa akin lang, hindi ko na bahala na yung korte sa kanila. Yung mga gumagawa ng ganyan, may allegations na this. If our justice system is still salvageable, sabihin, is honest and true, and then that will take care of that. Yung sa akin, I would worry about the bigger issue na paano mo papakainin, paano mo isasalba yung 100 million Filipinos.
Correct.
From these issues. How will you, in the immediate term, just like we laid out, anong importansya ng PAGCOR or PCSO issue pag padala na ng nuclear missile ang Russia sa Ukraine?
Yes, pag may gulo na.
Anong magagawa natin kung gano'n, di ba? So, all of this will pale in comparison. What the president should do, and still ask him to do it, is to make a strong statement, not just in word, but in deed. Kasi narinig ko yung excerpt niya, yung speech niya dyan sa Singapore, para sabi niya, yung US and China should resolve their rivalry, tapos wag na idama yung Pilipinas. Pero, pinapayagan niya mag-EDCA, pinapayagan ng pumapasok dito. So,
correct.
So parang, hindi totoo yung pinagsasabi niya. He has to follow through on his So he can still save more lives. First, figure out and fix our agri-production immediately so that our people don't go hungry. Next, figure out how to stock up on medicines for our people in the next 6 months, the next year. So in case something happens, we still have a stockpile. Make deals already with Southeast Asian neighbors or immediate neighbors that can supply us with essential things. That's what I would do. Kailangan wartime president ka mag-isip. Because we are not in peacetime. We are in wartime right now. And we need a wartime president. We need someone who will make decisions in that way. Now, all of these other issues, quote unquote, kasi PIDEA, kese PCSO, kese may mga bago all the time, may lumalabas.
Yes.
Yes, those are important. But sabihin na natin, dahil sa mga issue yan, si BBM ay nag-resign. Sabihin na natin, will Sarah know what to do? Does she have this? Has she stated anything accepting that there is a problem? Maybe hindi siya makapagsalita ngayon dahil kalihim siya ng DepEd. But as a statesman, as a leader, this is the most important thing.
Correct.
Anuhin mo yung curriculum when binabomba na tayo.
Agree.
So we have, as a leader, you have to come out and say, we need this now. This is the issue. There's no other issue. Ngayon, kasi that means mas secure tayo kung naglabas siya ng mga statement na gano'n. Mas secure tayo na we have a leader in waiting.
Mm-mm.
Di ba? Kasi kung hindi pa pareho lang. Diba? So yung dating sa akin is she has to I think Sarah has some good advisors around her that give her like some of our friends from political analysts that have demonstrated also on their own that they know what's going on, no? Pero she as a leader, yes, maraming issue tong si President Bongbong. Kasama na yung asawa niya at yung mga kaibigan niya, close friends. But the issue again is bigger events around. So I don't know, yung mga ganun gusto niya magkagulo para walang problema. Dahil rin siya sa gulo if ever, di ba?
Correct.
Hindi siya makakatakas eh. So I don't think that's yun lang, Kat.
Hindi niya pwedeng gawing alibay yun. Talagang haharapin at haharapin niya at kinakailangan, lahat tayo. But kailangan natin, sabi mo nga, kailangan natin ng isang wartime leader na kinakailangan manindigan kung saan niya dadalhin ang kanyang bansa at ang mamamayang Pilipino. Dapat, of course, na protektahan niya. Pangalawa is, kailangan mabilis yung pagdesisyon niya. At kinakailangan, hindi yung parang nangaakit pa siya ng magiging kaaway ng bansang Pilipinas. 'Di ba? Ganun dapat. Anyway, it's time to read the text messages sent by our listeners. Their opinion does not necessarily reflect our own, but we reserve the right to read them to the public in the interest of freedom of speech. Of course, we have first text mula kay Christopher Cruz. Sabi niya, nalalagay tayo sa hindi magandang sitwasyon. Mula naman kay, naka-check-in naman sa atin si Lynn Mutas Sarco, sabi niya good evening. At mula kay Falala, third world country ma'am, Erica. We have been invaded by illegal aliens. Drugs are rampant, homelessness and lawlessness are normalized. Secrets will always be revealed. Sabi naman ni Boy at Periabras, good evening po Miss Cathy at mga katipon. Garapalan na itong pagnunupil ng bangag na administrasyon. At naka-check-in din sa atin si Ivan Riz pa rin Kiloy mula sa United Kingdom. Gayun din si Frank E. Esdal. At syempre, happy listening din nga pala kay Buboy, no? Alfredo Patriarca. At sabi naman ni Forever Young, sabi niya, greetings from Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. OFW here, safe po ba dito in case of World War III? Naku, ito tatanong sa atin yung ating si Forever Young, safe daw ba in case daw na magkaroon ng World War III? Walang safe, di ba? Ito, kasi nga kanina in-explain kung ano ang epekto pagka hindi na to labanan ng baril sa baril kundi nuclear weapons na, di ba?
Yeah, when you say World War III, there are what they call theaters of war. So there will be the Asian theater dito sa atin, sa may Taiwan. I'm assuming US versus China doon. Tapos yung Middle East, malaki. Tapos doon sa Europe with NATO and Russia. So you have various theaters. Tayo will be most, because of the proximity dito sa Taiwan Strait. But we will be affected long before that. Kasi pag nagka-tension na yan, ngayon na epekto na tayo because our imports are hindi na ganun kadami and we cannot afford.
Yes.
If the dollar goes up 58 na, 58.5 already. Pag tumataas natin, mas mahal yung pagkain natin, mas mahal yung angkat natin. So, mas nahihirapan yung gobyerno. Where will they generate? Ang gagawin nila, they'll probably try and print more money. When they print more money, your money loses value. It will not bring down prices. You need to increase production. You cannot increase import because it's expensive to import everything already. That's the danger of importing your basic services, your essentials. Rice, imagine, rice, tapos ngayon mag-import ka ng isda. Yung Department of Agriculture, yung business niya, isda, shipping. So ngayon mag-import ka. So we're not preparing. So there's no safe place. Apektado pa rin tayo, even if there's no direct nuclear bomb dropped on the Philippines. Apektado pa rin tayo, gutom ang tao natin. When you're gutom, tapos lalaganap yung droga, lalaganap yung krimen. Parang war zone na rin dito.
At mula pa rin sa text ni May Villanueva, sabi niya, paano naging konektado ang nangyayari sa Amerika at desisyon ng kaso kay Donald Trump? Malayo naman daw ang Pilipinas, sabi niya. May iba naman na, at bukod dyan, may magagawa pa ba tayo dyan? Prophecy yan. Sabi niya, talagang mangyayari daw. Sabi niya ganon, Itos. So, sabi pa rin ni Mahiyaing Mami, watching from Hong Kong, at muli, sabi ni Ivan Rees pa rin, Killoy, the winners of World War III are Wall Street and City of London. Nako. At mula pa rin kay Falala, sabi niya, Putin is being cornered by all these countries. The US, NATO, and EU are escalating the war into World War III. The US, the mastermind. Yes, I hope the Philippines will not entertain the US into going to war with China. The end time is here. People repent and confess that Jesus is Lord. This is the place to get real news. MSM will not feature these kinds of issues on mainstream media. At mula naman kay Paul Vincent Naag Lopez, the end time of activists in Makabayan Black and Red Tag, end of the vaccine and illegal drug and alcoholic abuse, end of disaster, natural calamity, end of the war in Mindanao, Europe, and Asia. At mula naman kay It's MXD Midnight siguro to, lahat naman ng World War, US ang pasimuno. Tama naman si It's. Sabi ni Ricardo Horillo, we are pro-Orthodox Jewish and Palestinian Christian because we are people in this earth, pro-human. We don't promote modern Hamas or Zionist dramas. Hashtag Free Palestine, hashtag Birthplace of Jesus. Mula pa rin kay Paul Vincent Naag, God bless you Partido KDP. Thank you po, Mang Paul. At mula naman kay Bienvenido Pramisha Stan Jr., heroes don't lie, heroes multiply. And mula kay Joe Wa, salamat sir sa inyong pagsasabi ng katotohanan. At mula pa rin kay Fala, wars have come to pass. All these leaders need to be exposed. Revelations say so. More prophecy will be revealed. At sabi naman ni Andy Gaviola, Trump for 2024, Duterte for 2024. At sabi uli ni Lala, US should not underestimate Russia's military defense and offense. That's what the US did at the beginning of the Ukraine war with Russia. Sanctions will never work on countries that are self-sufficient. Correct. Kaya it's best that the Philippines should not agree to go to war. Kayo kawawa, kahit taga-Amerika, we will also be affected greatly. The people, not the politicians. Politicians will get richer. At mula naman, BS ang verdict. This is the right time for Trump to get his second term. At mula naman kay Isra, hashtag BBM resign, hashtag no to war. Tama ka dyan, Isra. At mula naman kay Fala, America's livelihood is war. War and pharma. The Philippines should maintain neutrality with other countries. At si Fernando Rosales naman, naka-check-in sa atin. Okay, yan ang ilan po sa ating mga texters at nagpahatid po ng messages from cellphone at mula sa ating mga YouTube and FB page. Anyway, bago po, it's already 8:54 na po ng gabi, Philippine Standard Time, at sa huling bahagi po ng ating palatuntunan ay mag-iiwan lamang po ang Pangulo ng Katipunan ng Demokratikong Pilipino ng mensahe sa sambayan ng Pilipino, lalo na sa mga leader ng bansang Pilipinas. Itos?
Okay, short lang to, no? Because medyo wala tayong time masyado. But I urge you to watch this again. Kung pwede, sa Facebook o sa watch this episode again, listen to the reports, listen to the analysts, and then do your own research po. Magpumunta kayo sa X, pumunta kayo sa YouTube at Rumble at mag-dig kayo, maghanap kayo ng mga news, mga ganyan. Tapos gawin yung everyday habit yon. Wag yung mga news natin, wala po kayong makuhang matino sa mga news natin o mga dyaryo natin o mga ano. Kasi lahat yan kontrolado. All our corporate media that's mainstream media. Wala kayong makuha dyan. And broaden your horizons. Again, we have to encourage na broaden natin yung horizon natin. Wag lang yung mga single issue sa Pilipinas kasi si yung mayor ng Bamban Tarlac, si Go, or these other issues. Kasi madali tayong alinlangin ng mga ganon. Yan ang nangyayari. And therefore, we remain dumbed down. So I encourage you to do your own research, broaden, try to learn, and then keep our discussion going every Sunday. So that yung mga questions natin mas deeper and yung reactions natin, we become all on the same page, and that means that's a better and more enlightened citizenry worthy of a republic. Yun lang po. Catch us in all our channels, pati yung mga replay po. I'll see you next week.
Thank you, Itos. At lagi nga po nating sinasabi sa lahat po ng pinag-usapan po natin ngayon, importante po na maging mapagmatsyag, suriin at alamin ang katotohanan. Maging bukas ang tenga at kaisipan. Matutong magsaliksik at balikan ang kasaysayan dahil nagbibigay ito ng aral sa ating lahat upang mailantad kung sino ang tunay na sinungaling na sumisira ng ating bansa. Huwag matakot manindigan sa tama. Ilabas ang katotohanan dahil sa dulo, tayo ang lilikha ng isang makatarungan, mapayapa at maunlad na kinabukasan para sa ating mga kabataan. Gisingin ang ating mga pinuno sa publiko at pribadong sektor na ang pangangalaga sa buhay ng tao, pagtataguyod ng pangkalahatang kapakanan at kabutihang panlahat ay dapat na kanilang pangunahing interes at pananagutan. With that, sa ngalan po ng mga katipo ng palatuntunang ito at ng pamunuan ng Radio Mindanao Network at Katipunan Channel, lalo na ang mga magagaling nating transmitter, engineer at technicians, mga broadcast technicians natin sa loob ng himpilan ng DZXL at syempre dito rin sa ating studio sa Katipunan Channel, sina Engineer Dominador Abogado, Valentina Villasica, Resurrection Ray Albesa, Erwin Makatangay, Cecilio Vilencio, Alex Abelon Sr., si Chris Narvaez, sa ating si Sydney Dan Sniper o si Daniel Fangonilo at si Richard Ramirez. Maraming salamat po sa inyo. Kami po ay pansamantalang nagpapaalam at nagpapasalamat na sinamahan ninyo kami ngayon. Ang hora de peligro ng ating bayan at ng buong mundo. Hanggang sa linggo pong muli mga katipon, alas 7 hanggang alas 9 ng gabi. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat.